So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Audacia's latest Tech Talk, this time on policies, principles, people, the building blocks of AI governance. So, what we'll be covering today, well, I want to set off by defining AI and AI governance. I think we're going to talk through some key points around implementation, why it's important. We're going to look at what makes governance successful, and then we can discuss some ideas of where we can start. So a little bit about me. My name is Chris Bentley. I'm a senior data scientist at Audacia, and my data science background is in academia, utilities, rail, and through consultancy, where I've been lucky enough to apply AI and statistical methods to things like retail, financial, industrial, medical, and security industries. So currently, we live in a pretty confusing time where companies are trying to make their brands synonymous with the current AI boom. We've got things like Apple's AI, which is Apple Intelligence, and we did have Samsung's Advanced Intelligence, which they've now changed to Galaxy AI. I think these are probably two of the worst offenders. Therefore, it can be a pretty confusing space to navigate, especially if you're only entering it from these recent advancements made post 2022 with foundational large language models like ChatGPT. So before we get onto any of the governance, let's set a clear definition of artificial intelligence. So, textbook definition. Artificial intelligence is technology that enables computers and machines to simulate human learning, comprehension, problem solving, decision making, creativity, and autonomy. Essentially, artificial intelligence is a field of computer science that encapsulates quite a lot. And that's usually a lot more than what people realize. And the AI that they're actually referring to is only a small but very powerful subset. And that usually sits in that innermost layer of generative AI. But what else does it encapsulate? Well, very early artificial intelligence was all built around rule-based systems. These rule-based systems are fully programmatic and used when tasks are well understood and clearly defined. All the rules are defined by a human to mimic their actions. And then we had the huge breakthrough of machine learning. And machine learning is essentially algorithms that learn patterns from data to make predictions or decisions without being explicitly programmed for each of these tasks. Through this, we're getting closer to the idea of how a human performs actions by adding in that learning aspect. And then a subset of machine learning, which was another huge advancement, was through deep learning. And this is a type of machine learning that uses multi-layered neural networks to learn really complex patterns from large data sets. And through this, we're starting to use the idea of how we think the brain works by applying neurons and how information flows through them. And then innermost of this artificial intelligence bubble, we've got generative AI. And all generative AI is deep learning models trained to create new content, which could be text, images, audio, or code, based on patterns learned from vast amounts of data. And this is really our current peak of model complexity, often needing huge amounts of compute power to run, and has defined the mainstream usage of AI. So I think it's important to remember that when we refer to AI systems or AI models, it can be in reference to any of these layers of AI. It usually just depends on the specific use case. Now, you may have already got a slight idea of what AI governance is, or this might be your first time looking into it. Therefore, it'd be good to set a definition for AI governance. So AI governance is a framework of guidelines, processes, and practices and they're going to ensure that our AI systems are ethical, safe, and transparent, and they're going to guide how they are developed, deployed, and used. And that really sits nicely into those buckets which form the topic of this talk, which is policies, principles, and people. Now, as AI capabilities grow, so do the risks and responsibilities. Without proper governance, we risk unintended consequences like discrimination, job displacement, or even loss of control over powerful systems. They should also oversee how we build, train, deploy, monitor, and importantly, use AI in our everyday lives, from checking for bias in data sets, to writing explainability documentation, to ensuring our models comply with laws like the EU AI Act and UK GDPR. It's really important to remember that governance touches every part of the pipeline. And all of this is to make sure that AI systems and their intended usage align with human values. So, an analogy I like to make is comparing AI governance to rules of the road. So, suppose that you are traveling from AI to B. How can we relate the rules of the road to AI governance? Well, we'll start by defining our scenario. Our destination is the problem or use case we're trying to solve, and the roads are the business environment. And the business environment is going to shape the journey with their own constraints and conditions. Now, we, the developers or users, are the drivers, and we need the right vehicle for the job, which in this case, we're selecting an AI system. However, just like you wouldn't fly a rocket to your local supermarket, it's equally important to know when an AI system is appropriate. And safe travel isn't just about picking the right vehicle for the job. There are also a number of rules and systems in place to keep traffic moving safely and efficiently, just like we have AI governance dictating the proper use of AI systems. You've got signage, signalling, speed limits, and even sat-navs, all to make sure you're navigating the roads correctly, not putting yourself or anyone else in danger, and using your car in the intended manner. These are our governance policies and procedures. You probably also have some level of built-in driving assist, in the same way that most AI systems will have some safeguarding built into them before they reach the end user. And that's going to provide a base level of security and bias mitigation. And then hopefully, you're also qualified to be on the road in the first place, proving that you're safe to drive and understand the rules of the road, which is where our governance auditing, reviews, and certification comes in. So just like safe driving requires the right vehicle, clear rules, and a qualified driver, responsible AI development demands appropriate systems, robust governance, and proven accountability to ensure that we reach our destination safely and ethically. So how do we fit all of this into our business environment? Why is it important? And what could happen if we ignore it? Well, let's start by considering where we think we fit into a typical AI project lifecycle. So, whilst this is slightly oversimplified, I believe a typical AI project follows this cycle, going through things like problem framing, data processing, development, deployment, and refinement. And as an AI user, I think we can approach this cycle at 3 different levels. We've got the built system level, which is on the bottom. We've got the cloud services level, which is in the middle. And we've got the AI product level, which is at the top. So at the lowest level, the AI system's got to be built, right? This will typically be done by a team of data scientists or developers who are given a problem statement so that they can develop a bespoke solution. And then we've got that middle level, where you may have access to a number of cloud services, and these cloud services are going to offer a variety of pre-built solutions. And this is really going to empower you to select the right one for the job, where you or your developers are mainly just going to prepare the data, train the model, and then deploy it and monitor it. And at that very highest level, we've got these AI products that anyone can access. They tend to be more general in scope, and we tend to use them passively rather than trying to deploy our own solutions. You've got things like ChatGPT, Copilot, or Midjourney. So if we put ourselves as the end user in the center, can we see where we fit in at these different levels and where we may have to consider governing principles and policies? So at that built system level, the end user may only pass the problem statement to the data scientists or their developers, and then they're going to provide monitoring and feedback when it's deployed. So they don't have that much involvement in the building of the model, but really this just means that they have to consider how the governing principles are being followed during development, largely out of their hands, right? Have they put guidelines in place to steer fair and secure building of AI systems? And then we move up and we've got that cloud services level. The end user may be deploying solutions themselves, or again, they might be just defining the problem statements to be passed on to developers and data scientists. Either way, they're still heavily involved with the usage and feedback of the solution. So there now may be some slight more interaction with the models themselves, even though they're not building them. And in this sense, they're going to really have to follow and consult those AI guidelines themselves. And then if we move up again and we get to that product level usage, The end user is only really going to be involved in the usage of the product and the feedback of that AI system. So if they're not that heavily involved, then what governance considerations do they really have? Well, the onus is now on them to research the transparency of the product that they're using. Can they be sure it was built with governance in mind? Can they ensure that it is built with a fair, secure, and ethical model? Importantly, governance doesn't diminish as we move up the stack, it simply changes shape. At each level and stage of the cycle, from building to deploying to using AI, different governance responsibilities emerge. We've got things like ensuring fairness in model development, we've got aligning cloud service use with legal standards, and making ethical choices in product usage. So no matter the level, end users must stay aware and accountable. Governance is everyone's job, just in slightly different forms. So you might be sitting there now and thinking, I've got no need for AI governance. I don't really have any involvement with any AI-led projects. I would just take into consideration this information from OpenAI. They're stating that ChatGPT has roughly 800 million users per week, and OpenAI state that 92% of Fortune 500 companies are using its products. So, are you or your team part of the 800 million? How much of that usage is vetted and authorized by your IT departments, your legal departments, and your upper management? Well, luckily, we now have a term for this, and we call this shadow AI because we couldn't think of anything more scary. What it actually refers to is the use of AI products within an organization without formal approval or oversight from the IT department or upper management. It often involves employees independently adopting AI solutions, such as these Gen AI tools like ChatGPT, to enhance productivity, bypassing your established governance protocols. Now, this is causing huge risks for businesses, as we've got this unauthorized AI usage, which can lead to inadvertent exposure of sensitive information. For instance, a poll indicated that 1 in 5 UK companies experience data leakage due to employees using Gen AI without proper oversight. We also have to consider that there's regulatory non-compliance, where AI tools are being utilized without adhering to data protection regulations such as GDPR, which can result in substantial fines and legal repercussions. And then we may want to think that our decisions or content generated by AI might not necessarily align with your organizational ethical standards or just general ethos. And this can lead to public backlash and a loss of consumer trust. So, what is it that's causing this rise in shadow AI? Can we really put the blame fully on the individual? Well, I think it's pretty hard to, as these AI tools are becoming increasingly easy to access, often available as software as a service, meaning that they can be adopted without having to even involve IT or security teams at all. You also have to take human nature into account. People are always looking to increase productivity, right? And these AI systems are very good at completing repetitive tasks. And they might get adapted, especially if the user perceives that their existing tools that they're using are inadequate or just slow in comparison. And then another key reason is that there's just a lack of awareness and training in general. Without proper education surrounding the risks and governance of AI, people are far less likely to recognize the potential implications of improper usage. So what happens when we ignore or don't implement proper AI governance? Well, I've got a couple of use cases here. You may have heard of them already, but we're going to dive into them a little bit deeper. On one hand, we've got Zillow. Now, Zillow is an online real estate marketplace, and they had an AI-driven home buying and selling model embedded in its Zillow offers platform. Essentially, this machine learning model would predict the purchase price of properties before making a bid. The only thing is that the model was trained on outdated market data with no way to monitor model drift or continuously fine-tune the model with new data over time. So when they put this into practice, it essentially systematically overbid on properties due to it heavily overestimating house values in a rapidly shifting market. Unfortunately, this led to Zillow incurring over $500 million in losses in a single quarter. They then had to shut down their Zillow Offers program entirely, and they laid off a quarter of its workforce, suffering significant reputational damage in the process. We also have Samsung, and during the massive ChatGPT boom in 2023, Samsung employees, like many others, to give them credit, we're using ChatGPT for debugging and code assistance. Now, I've written Shadow AI as the cause here, but you could easily argue that the fault lies somewhat more with upper management or even OpenAI for not being as transparent with their data privacy and usage policies as they could have been. So what happened? Well, Samsung employees were pasting proprietary source code and internal documentation into ChatGPT to get some coding help. And as we now know, ChatGPT can retain user inputs for training purposes, which, when you think about it, creates a serious risk of exposing sensitive intellectual property. And through this, it seems like there was no clear corporate guidelines or controls preventing this kind of unmonitored AI usage. It was only when Samsung's oversight mechanisms detected that users had been inputting confidential information into the chatbot, and that information was being used to further fine-tune the model, that Samsung just put a temporary ban on all usage of ChatGPT. So we can see that not following any AI governance can have negative effects on businesses. A lot of what we've discussed so far has sounded pretty scary, but AI governance is not just about compliance and safeguarding, it's also about improving business performance. So one of these things to consider is that trust equals adoption. Governance helps build user and customer trust, which is crucial for internal and external AI usage. It can also help in risk mitigation, where you're going to avoid legal, operational, and financial risks through robust documentation, testing, and accountability. And then we can also use it to increase operational efficiency. You know, if you make your AI well governed, it's going to be auditable, reproducible, and much easier to scale. And on top of all of this, it's also going to give you a competitive edge, leading to things like a faster path to production if you're implementing effective standardization. It's going to enhance your data practices, which can then improve model performance. And as an aside, you'll also attract top talent who value ethical and efficient tech above all else. So now that we understand the importance of AI governance in our business, we may want to start thinking about how we would actually implement it. I think a place that we should start is the consideration of the core principles that are going to govern how you, your team, and your organization want to approach AI. These should be the underlying high-level ethical and operational guidelines that steer responsible development, deployment, and usage of AI systems, whilst also aligning organization values, legal requirements, and societal norms. To give you an idea of things to consider, I've included 6 example principles split into 2 core areas, which I have titled Oversight and Integrity, and then User Rights and Protection. Now, you may think that these are very generalized when we get into them, but if you then go ahead and research some AI governance policies that are out there, you'll find that most use these or very similar principles as starting points before narrowing them with your organizational context. So first one being oversight and integrity. I consider these principles as ones that most closely align with general AI usage, model implementation, or even model building, and also how they impact the wider business environment. So the first of these core principles being accountability. Accountability defines roles and responsibilities regarding AI, and it gives people ownership of their AI system usage, and importantly, leaders the ability to identify responsible parties and efficiently take corrective actions. We also have a principle around ethics. This is a big one at the moment, and this is going to allow us to align our AI usage with underlying moral values and ensure AI systems are built with societal values in mind. This can be a key policy when building trust in AI integration, especially around bias, toxicity, or discrimination. And then our third core principle is transparency. And transparency is all about clarity around how AI systems function and how they are being used. So by being transparent, you're opening up the ability to be effectively audited, and it improves the general AI understanding throughout your business. The other half to these, we have user rights and protection. I see these principles as ones that more align with protecting users and organizations when deploying or interacting with AI systems. Again, we've got 3 core principles that make up this group. The first one being security. So the security principle is going to ensure that AI systems are protected against unauthorized access, misuse and threats, which is going to maintain integrity and trust. We also have the privacy principle. So privacy safeguards, personal and sensitive information being fed into these AI systems. It's also going to ensure compliance with regulations and user expectations. And finally, we have control. And control is going to give users and organizations the ability to manage, restrict, or override AI behavior to ensure alignment with human intent. Again, these principles are very high level, but they will form the foundation of your governance policies and AI practices. So if you can tie them to your existing policies, then you absolutely should, as it will make it easy to align AI implementation in the context of your organization. So if we jump back to those previous two case studies where we saw failures around a lack of governance, would establishing good policies early on have helped? For Zillow, I think there's three of these core policies that could have helped. One of those is accountability. So having increased ownership of the model via some form of human-in-the-loop methodology, they could have prevented further losses by reviewing purchases during periodic reviews. And then we have another one, which is around control. Perhaps they could have implemented some adaptive thresholding based on market trends, and this could have restricted that model output, or at least flag extreme bids for review prior to making them. And another one is around transparency. And through transparency, they may have missed out on not making the training data apparent to key stakeholders, or even explaining to them how static the model actually was. If they had talked to these key stakeholders, maybe they could have warned them about not taking into account an evolving and volatile market. Then if we jump to Samsung, I think we've got one around ethics, where even though the engineers were acting with very good intent, they were quick to utilize this new technology to make their work easier, without consideration of any responsible usage guidance. Therefore, they were unaware of the harm that it could actually cause. And another one surrounding security, where stringent data restrictions around sensitive data could have prevented code and documentation being passed to the model at a system level, rather than having to rely on users to decide what is and isn't allowed. And lastly, we've got one around privacy. Being quick to implement privacy training surrounding the sudden boom in Gen AI could have empowered engineers to know why they shouldn't be pasting company-sensitive documentation and code into ChatGPT. Now, these examples show why it's important to have your core principles at the heart of your policies and AI usage in general. Now we've considered core principles that set the foundation of responsible AI usage, how can we start putting governance into practice? As we mentioned at the beginning, your policies are really going to create a framework of guidelines, processes, and practices around AI usage. And these can come in many different forms, and they're expected to evolve over time. But a good starting point would be to create an overarching AI governance policy document, and this is going to contain them all. If you already have a set of organizational policies, these will be a great jumping off point. We can use their structure and style as a baseline for the new governance documentation. The types of policies we're going to want to consider in our documentation are things around a formalization of our core principles, some kind of table of key roles and responsibilities in the business surrounding AI, implementation guides, preferably with examples around design and developmental standards. We want to include risk and impact assessments for new AI usage and auditing, and then something around monitoring and post-deployment oversight. This is going to dictate how AI is handled in production and how issues are escalated. Now, the policy should be designed with organizational context in mind, and if effective and dynamic, can positively influence every aspect of your business. In the same way, you should let your business positively influence your policies. Always remember to write clear context specific principles and scope. Always define responsibilities and escalation paths, and then whatever you do, don't make them so complicated that it restricts workflows and innovation, massively reducing the likelihood that these policies will see widespread adoption. Now, one or more of your key policies should really surround the risks involved with AI implementation. You may want to build these directly into your governance policy document, or have them as separate tools you reference, which you can more easily update to keep dynamic. Whether these are auditable checklists that you require for every new AI product build or integration, or readiness questionnaires to gauge how well the AI system will fit into existing workflows, they should be included and be easy for your team to access. It can also be useful to keep a list or database of tools that have been allowed or prohibited via user-driven recommendations and review. Now, some of the implementation risks that you might want to consider are how static is the AI system? Is it going to scale with the business and an increased workflow? Is the AI system going to be processing highly sensitive or personal data? And how much additional work will be required to put that AI system into production? Now, whilst everyone in your organization will be responsible for following AI governance policies, it can be useful to define specific roles that target a lot of the tasks associated with managing governance. It's really good to have a buffer between upper management, who will ultimately be authorizing the decisions and setting the underlying principles, and the wider team who will be applying your governance and utilizing these AI systems. I'm guessing that the role that most organizations won't have is some sort of AI governance lead. And this is just going to be someone that can take the responsibility for driving AI policy across the business, liaising with upper management, and keeping up to date with ongoing advancements. Now, the role may appear more naturally if you have people that take an active interest in AI or work in that domain, like us data scientists. Or you may look at providing training, either internal or external, to members who would be best placed to take on this responsibility. So you now have a tailored AI governance policy. You've got a set of tools to assess effective ways of implementing AI whilst mitigating risks, and you've got clearly defined roles and responsibilities surrounding AI usage in your organization. But how do you start putting them into practice? Well, I think the key here is going to be how you propagate your policies through the wider business, and this can only be done with effective communication. Whether it's the team's first introduction to the governance policy or its iterative changes further down the line, they need to be made aware. Clearly defining roles and responsibilities and making the policy easily accessible is definitely going to assist in this. You now need to make sure that the team has everything they need to successfully apply the policies in their daily workflows. This is going to be achieved through education, where everyone has clear instructions on what the responsibilities are, how to approach the policy, and what the policy sets out to achieve. It's also very important to allow open discussion surrounding these policies. Some people may have concerns about the use of AI in general, and involving them early on can help alleviate it, especially if they know that you're taking AI adoption seriously with stringent governance. More than that, though, open discussion gives everyone a platform to suggest improvements, understand how it benefits them, and hopefully conclude why the policies are needed in the first place. Unfortunately, creating a set of policies, making everyone aware, and then just calling it a day isn't really possible with the rapid growth and evolution of AI that we're currently seeing. This is forcing us all to be a bit more dynamic in our approach to governance, and it's forcing us to keep on top of all of these new advancements. So a little bit of additional information that might add some context to this. It took ChatGPT just 2 months to reach 100 million users, making it the fastest growing consumer application in history when it was launched in late 2022. Since then, we know that models are becoming far more complex. We know that there's a rough 1,000 times increase in their underlying model parameters. We're seeing training time and the cost to train absolutely plummet. And we're also seeing their capabilities grow thanks to things like agentic methods. And these are pushing us ever closer to the idea of artificial general intelligence, where AI can perform any task as well as a human. So, as a baseline, I think there's at least 3 things that you can do to make sure that you don't get left behind. The first thing is going to be around training and continuous education. We really want to make sure that your people are kept up to date. They may not need to know all of the specifics, but keeping them up to date with ongoing advancements and providing periodic training can make sure they follow evolving regulatory guidelines as well as all the developments with AI systems. Next, we want to consider monitoring and evaluation. So put plenty of work into monitoring and continuously evaluating the AI systems you've got in place, especially if you're using foundational models, as you don't want to find that an update drastically changed the output, or on the flip side, that you aren't using legacy or outdated AI architecture that leaves your system antiquated and your organization uncompetitive. We also want to think about having dynamic policies. We want to build your policies in a way that means they can be iterated easily with strict version control. Can you review them periodically to make sure they're in line with current regulations? And are they still being effective with the types of AI systems and use cases that you're currently handling? We can also look to the bigger regulatory landscape for guidance too. Now, a lot of these are non-statutory and principle-based frameworks focusing on responsible AI innovation. There's a couple of examples that we've got here in the UK. So we've got a pro-innovation approach to AI regulation. This one is based on 5 key principles. Those 5 key principles are, we've got safety, security, and robustness. We've got appropriate transparency and explainability, fairness, accountability and governance, and then contestability and redress. So hopefully, to these 5 key principles, you can see there's some relation to the 6 core principles that we mentioned earlier. Like I said, a lot will have very similar core principles. They just tend to make them more narrow in approach, really taking on that organizational context. Another one from the UK that we've got is the AI playbook for the UK government. And this is guidance to help government departments and public sector organizations harness AI technologies safely, effectively, and responsibly. It's heavily around Gen AI. However, the latest version aims to encapsulate all forms of AI. And this really shows how dynamic we all have to be. It's built around 10 key principles this time. And these 10 key principles are more statements of how AI should be handled. For example, you understand how to manage the full AI life cycle. As we can see, it's really taking those core principles and making them more aligned with the use case. We have similar things from the EU and the US, but on the other end of the scale, we're now seeing global governance policies put in place as well. The OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, aimed at building better policies for better lives. I believe this is the first intergovernmental standard on AI, with the idea that there's a set of standards that OECD member countries adhere to. They include value-based principles and recommendations for policymakers, which may be of some use to a lot of people starting out building their own AI governance framework. We've also got global ISO 42001. This is an official ISO accreditation on AI. And again, I believe it's the world's first AI management system standard, setting out a structured way to manage risks and opportunities with AI, balancing innovation with governance. This could be useful if you want to set a solid foundation of AI system integration within your organization, and also have an accreditation to show that you are forward thinking about AI governance. However many of these that you want to look into, I do fully recommend looking at all of them, especially as a starting point to building your own AI governance policy. Now, I think by this point, we've developed a decent foundation of what AI governance is, why it matters to your business, how you can effectively implement it, and what you can do to evolve with current AI landscapes. Therefore, I think it'd be useful just to go through some things that we may have already touched on, that I believe can aid in making AI governance successful. It also allows me to tie everything nicely back to where we began, with policies, principles, and people, the building blocks of AI governance. So policies. Policies are going to be the key to effective governance. They're going to guide the development, deployment, and usage of these AI systems. So what can we do to make our policies effective? Well, to start with, I think we definitely want clear and accessible documentation. You might have some fantastic ideas, but if your documentation is clunky, hard to read, and hidden away, the wider business is unlikely to put them into practice. We also want to ensure that we're doing regular audits and risk assessments. This is going to ensure that any new AI system is only going to be adopted if they're up to your standards. It's also going to make sure that legacy systems don't fall behind. And then as well, on top of this, we want to make sure that all of our frameworks are adaptive. Due to the fast-moving nature of this field, you don't want to create a static framework that requires a lot of effort to rework every time it has to adapt to a new AI tool or regulation that comes into play. And then we also have our principles. The principles are going to lay the foundation for your policies and guide how they're built, tying AI development usage to societal and organizational expectations. So what can we do to make sure that we are building really useful principles? We want to make sure that they're compatible. So we want to make sure the principles align with those already existing in our organization, ensuring that they're contextually relevant to the business. We also want to consider adaptability. So we design the principles so they can be adaptable in a varied set of scenarios and practices. Keeping them too narrow in scope is just going to lead to them being ignored due to obscurity. And then we also want to think about interpretability. It's similar in a sense to adaptability, but we really want to focus on avoiding complexity in the definitions. That means only a small subset of people can actually implement them. And then we have our people. And I believe that people will arguably be the most important driver in successful AI governance, as they'll adapt and follow your policies and hopefully live and breathe your principles. So what can we do to empower our people? Well, first off, we want to give them well-defined roles. Everybody should know what their responsibilities are with respect to governance and who they can speak to for further guidance. This added visibility can foster accountability, and it gives the team a sensible chain of escalation. We also want to offer periodic training and assessment. This is going to aid in propagating your dynamic policies through the organization with an auditable trail showing the team is up to date and they know what's expected of them with regards to AI. And as well, we want to foster a positive AI culture. Now, AI is a hot topic and more people are finding interest in it. So if you let these people express their enthusiasm, they can be the biggest positive drivers of well thought out governance to the wider team. So these are just a few ideas of what I think can help make your governance successful. But there's plenty more, I'm sure, out there that are just as important. So we've covered a lot in this talk, and you may be sat there finding it all quite daunting, not knowing where to start. Well, just thinking about it and starting to discuss it is a fantastic jumping off point. And I think next steps are going to depend a lot on how AI fits into your business and how heavily integrated it is. If you're coming from a position of having no AI integration in your business, but you are curious about how it can start to improve your practices, you might even be suspicious of shadow AI after this talk, I'd probably start by thinking about what you'd like AI integration to look like in your business. Are there certain processes or tasks that you can see it improving? And also consider how widespread AI actually is. Is the team using AI without implicit instruction or restrictions? Thinking about this stuff first is going to really enable you to clearly see what governance policies need to be put in place. Then if you're coming from a position where AI is sometimes used, maybe you've done a few AI-led projects, but more through external contractors or maybe sporadically in-house, then we might want to start by considering who in the organization is best seated to start leading a lot of the discussion around AI implementation, potentially taking on that AI governance lead role. Do you have AI experts already, or will you need to look at upskilling or hiring externally? Do you have any standardization surrounding AI implementation? In those AI projects that you're involved with, what things went well and what lessons were learned that could form guiding policies? Again, using examples that you've got in-house is going to be really useful in thinking how the governance can be built around your organizational context. Or, maybe you're already very well established in the world of AI, with experts who can implement or build their own AI solutions from scratch with cloud services and products, but you've only recently started considering AI governance. In this case, it might be good to start thinking about those core principles. Maybe and probably you adhere to them already, but have you ever formalized them? Now is going to be a good time to start getting policy and principle ideas documented. As well, how will you start building risk assessment around an already established AI implementation procedure? Again, is it purely about formalizing the procedure and making it auditable? How are you going to do it without stifling creativity and minimizing process lag? It can seem more difficult when you're already established in the world of AI, but really you've got a lot of expertise that you can lean on to build these principles and policies effectively. So these are just a few of my ideas of where you can start based on potentially where you are in the world of AI. I hope they've been useful. But that, again, just having conversations surrounding AI governance is a great place to start. And that actually brings me to the end of this talk. So I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone that's attended. Thanks for sitting there and listening to me ramble on about AI governance. I hope some of it's been useful and there's some stuff that you can take away to your wider businesses and start having those important discussions about what AI governance means to you. If you have any queries about the talk or anything in general, just email us at talks@audacia.co.uk. And I'd also like to take this time to plug our next tech talk. This one is called Scan, Extract, Automate, a Guide to Azure Document Intelligence. It's going to be headed by Reece Smith, our principal software engineer. I know it's going to be really cool. He's got a lot of great things to say. And Azure Document Intelligence is a really cool bit of tech. So I'll definitely be attending that one. It's on Thursday, 26th of June. I hope to see you guys there too. So I think we've got a few minutes left, maybe, in which sense I'll move on to some questions and answers and see if there's anything that I can help with. So we've got one here, which is saying, let's have a look. How can governance prevent shadow AI or unauthorized AI adoption within teams? That's an interesting one, and we touched on it a little bit. But I'm going to say that it's probably all about effective communication. It's about letting the team know what they can and what they can't do with these AI models, what the models are doing, how that data is being processed, is it being retained. In one extreme, I suppose you could flat out restrict the tools until you're absolutely sure. Or you could just give people access to enterprise versions of these foundational models that don't use inputs to fine tune. Again, I think the key thing here is going to be effective communication through the wider team. I've probably got time for one more, so let's have a look. Ooh, what are the most common governance failures you've seen and what is it that caused them? That's an interesting one. I think as a data scientist, it's probably going to be in laying out those clear guidelines during the development stage, especially around data choice and handling and processing. Yeah, I think there's a lot of instances where us data scientists get very enthusiastic about what models we're going to deploy and how we're going to deploy them and also experiment with them. And I can see a lot of the downfalls being around what data was selected to mitigate a lot of these things like bias, toxicity, and make sure it's got the right sentiment, etc. I think this is one where we've seen real life examples. I think Tesla, with their sort of crash detection models, was found to be fairly racist, I think, in the end, because the data it was trained on just wasn't wide enough in scope for what they needed. So yeah, I think one of the biggest downfalls, especially as a data scientist, comes around that applying AI governance to the data during development. Okay, so I think that's about all I've got time for. If there's any questions that I've missed, I'll perhaps try and get round to them, or if I didn't answer your question, just contact us and I'll see what I can do. But thank you so much for joining. Hope to see you at the next one and have a great afternoon. Take care and goodbye.